In a child's life, there are many milestones which are celebrated. A first birthday, Christmas, their first day at school, the list goes on, and with each passing event, they continue to remind us that life is fleeting and should be treasured. The first time a son or daughter spends time away from home is always an anxious experience for any parent, a sign that their children are growing up and soon enough will fly the nest into new territory. For a mother and father in Wyoming in the early 1950s, their worst fears were realized when their daughter mysteriously disappeared during a summer camping trip. Swedish-born Helen Jensen married Peter Smith, son of former Wyoming Governor Nels H. Smith, on the 23rd of October 1937 at her parents' home in Greenwich, Connecticut. Residing in Sundance, Wyoming, the couple became parents to 2 children. A son, Nels Jensen Smith, was born on the 29th of January 1939, and on the 11th of July 1942, they welcomed a daughter who they named Constance Christine Smith, known as Connie. Unfortunately, the couple's relationship crumbled, and they divorced a few years later in 1949. After the breakup of her parents' marriage, Connie went to live with both Peter and Helen, the latter with primary custody rights, on their neighbouring ranches. The family were actively involved in not only ranching, but also trout production, meat packing, and mineral investments. Having been born to a wealthy family, she was an experienced traveller, enjoyed reading comics, colouring, swimming, and participating in various equestrian disciplines. Despite being involved in these activities, Connie was described as an intelligent, well-spoken, sheltered, and lonely child, with a vivid imagination and few friends. July of 1952 was set to be a time for new and exciting adventures for Connie Smith. On the 11th of July, she celebrated her 10th birthday, Helen taking a trip that weekend to visit her daughter for the occasion. By this point, she stood at 5 feet tall, weighed 85 pounds, had blue eyes and wavy light brown hair. Connie had long arms and flat feet, and she was very nearsighted, which required her to wear glasses. Furthermore, she was frequently mistaken for being older than she was, as she had started developing early. Before and during her birthday, Connie had expressed her enthusiasm for a summer camp she had been attending, which was the young girl's first experience away from home. Connie was particularly looking forward to a dance and a dressage event she was taking part in during the coming week. She had stayed at Camp Sloan for a couple of weeks already, and sources differ on whether she had 1 week left at the camp or 1 month. Camp Sloan was situated by the rural village of Lakeville, which lay within the locality of Salisbury, Litchfield County, Connecticut, under the direction of Ernest Roberts since 1918. Of those attending the camp, most were from New York City or Westchester County, New York, but of course, Connie was one of few who were not city dwellers. As with most young people, group divides tended to form cracks in relationships, and this appeared to be the case at Camp Sloan, fellow campers apparently resenting her because of her privileged upbringing. Despite these rumours, Helen Smith, who visited Connie on the 14th of July, recalled that her daughter was in good spirits and actually requested to stay at the camp longer than anticipated due to the upcoming horse show. However, Helen had already arranged for them to return to Wyoming once the week was over. She noted that Connie did not seem disheartened by this decision. A counsellor later claimed that following this visit from her mother, Connie seemed homesick. On the morning of the 16th of July 1952, Connie Smith rose from her slumber in a tent she shared with 7 other girl campers. Whilst getting ready for the day ahead, a camper who descended the bunk she had been sleeping on accidentally kicked Connie in the face, which caused her nose to bleed. Having an ice pack in her possession from the previous day, she tended to her nose. She told her tent mates that she was planning on skipping breakfast and going to the dispensary to return the ice pack, which she had used the previous day after bruising her hip following an incident where she fell out of the tent. At approximately 7:50 a.m, Connie ascended a winding dirt road, heading to the camp's entrance, and turned right down on Indian Mountain Road past Deep Lake Farm towards Lakeville. Even though it was reportedly a humid morning, Connie was wearing a red windbreaker, a brown bandana top with a halter neckline, navy blue shorts with plaid cuffs, tan leather shoes, and a red hair ribbon. In her possession, she may have had a black pocketbook containing photographs of her friends. She left the camp without her glasses, which were found to have been broken, and it was noted that she was very suntanned at the time of her disappearance. Connie's campmates returned from breakfast that morning at approximately 8:45 a.m. and discovered that the tent was empty and Connie was nowhere to be found. They alerted Carol Baker, their group leader, who went on to inform Ernest Roberts. The campsite and the surrounding areas were searched, yet there was still no sign of the 10-year-old. It was at 11:30 a.m. when police were contacted. During the investigation, a handful of witnesses came forward. According to Connecticut History on Blogspot, August Epp, the caretaker of Camp Sloan, reported that he had been driving near the camp's entrance and had seen Connie at around 8:15 a.m, turning right on Indian Mountain Road, and said that she had been picking flowers. He told authorities that he had mistaken her to be a camp counselor due to her height. A couple who had been out for a walk said that they had passed Connie about a quarter-mile north of the camp's gate, however they did not interact with her. Alice Walsh reported that she saw a girl, roughly 5 feet tall and 100 pounds in weight, crying while she walked. Alice offered a hand in giving the girl directions towards Lakeville. Mrs. William Walsh answered her door to find Connie on her doorstep. Connie asked, quote, "Could you tell me the way to Lakeville?" Mrs. Walsh replied, "Continue on up the hill and turn right on Route 44. Connie continued, "Do you mean straight up the hill?" "That's right, straight up the hill," Walsh told her. Mrs. Walsh's story also corroborated with the earlier reports, indicating that Connie looked as if she had been weeping and believed her to be of an older age. She took a last glance at the girl, who was indeed walking up the hill. Several other sightings were reported, including 2 maids outside of a servant's cottage at 50 Indian Mountain Road, whom the girl asked for directions to the same destination and departed. Mrs. Frank Barnett, who had been driving from Millerton on Route 44, claims she saw a girl walking east on the north side of the route just before turning in to Belgo Road. Police reports indicate that the last people to witness Connie Smith were Mr. and Mrs. John Brune on the south side of the road. The girl had apparently asked to hitchhike with them at the Route 44 Belgo Road intersection. When they left her, they saw her walking towards Lakeville Village Centre. Taking all of these witness accounts into consideration, if they were Connie, she would have had to cover 2.5 miles worth of road within a 45-minute time frame. On the 18th of July, Peter Smith arrived on the scene, soon joined by Helen, and was involved in the search on horseback. The pair shared the strong belief that their daughter had not merely wandered off into the woods and got lost. The surrounding roads and terrain were heavily scoured for clues, and also a 20-hour air search was carried out. Canaan Barracks troopers, bloodhounds and local volunteers also aided in combing the area, including the woodland, swamps, wells and abandoned buildings. Passing truck drivers, travellers, carnival workers, fellow campers and locals were questioned, yet authorities were no closer to finding Connie. Strangely, locals of Lakeville stated that they had never seen a girl matching Connie Smith's description travelling through the village on foot, and were firm of the opinion that someone would have noticed her. There were no public transport services running at the time. Several appeals were made to the public and various tips came in, however police were no closer to finding her. Police theorised many different possibilities as to what could have happened to the young girl. Some of the ideas put forward included that she could have been accidentally killed by a speeding car and subsequently her death was covered up. However, there was no evidence of blood or an accident having taken place anywhere on the road or surrounding area. It was suggested that she may have accidentally drowned in a nearby lake, despite the fact she was a skilled swimmer. Was Connie the victim of a killer who chose hitchhikers as his prey? Reports also theorised that she may have suffered from a delayed concussion and experienced amnesia. Theories circulated that possibly her parents were at war over the custody of Connie, and one of them had plotted to take her. This particular theory was rejected by both of her parents, who called it, quote, nonsense. Peter and Helen knew that Connie was familiar with finding her way to help if she had become lost. According to an article in the Daily News, Connie knew that she should, quote, walk downhill and find and follow a fence or a road. Her parents believed that it was a real possibility that their daughter had been kidnapped, partly due to her parents' financial standing. However, no ransom note was ever delivered to the Smiths. Another question worth exploring is, why did Connie leave Camp Sloan that morning? Was she homesick? Was she being bullied? Or had she been assaulted? The list of possibilities is almost endless. Was it coincidental that she had suffered 2 separate injuries within 24 hours? There was a $3,000 reward for any information regarding her disappearance, and a further $1,000 was offered for her body to be returned to her family. Sightings were reported all over the United States, in Massachusetts, New York, Alabama, Cincinnati, Vermont, and even sightings further north in Canada. In Cooperstown, New York, a girl matching Connie's description was seen with a group of travellers, and when this news reached Peter Smith, he thought it was possible that if it was his daughter, she may have been trying to travel to Chicago to meet with relatives. He flew to Chicago in hope of finding her, however, sadly, she did not appear. Further sightings in New York included a housewife who saw a girl resembling Connie riding a horse outside of her home in upstate New York. A construction worker also in that area allegedly shared his lunch with Connie, and a service station operator also witnessed a girl with a travelling group in Mabbittsville. A woman from Great Barrington in Massachusetts also allegedly saw Connie at the town's annual fall festival. Over 11,000 posters were distributed throughout the United States, and furthermore, Connie's dental records were published in the Journal of the American Dental Association. The festive season approached with no answers as to what happened to Connie Smith. Helen Smith pleaded for hunters to search wells and abandoned dwellings in the hope of finding her daughter. Helen stated to the Daily News, quote, "Whether she is alive or dead, I want her back. I've got to know what happened to her. Christmas was always such a big event in our house, but this year I feel I can't stand it. Each day is a little harder to face. We all know we might lose our children, but not to know what happened to her isn't human. Connie had a fall the day before she disappeared. She was not examined by a doctor. Maybe the fall was more serious than the nurse at the camp thought. If she is alive, I know Connie would get in touch with me if she could." The Smith family experienced an unimaginable amount of heartache throughout the years, many tips rekindling hope, only for the flame to dwindle into further sadness and disappointment. Even a convicted murderer, George Davis, claimed to have killed Connie, only retracting his statement half an hour before his execution, admitting he made a false confession. A carnival worker named William Henry Redmond was considered a possible suspect, having murdered an 8-year-old girl in 1951, the year before Smith vanished. He told fellow prison inmates in 1980 that he had taken the lives of 4 people and was considered a suspect in the disappearance of Beverly Potts. He was declared as being too ill to stand trial for the murder in 1951 and returned to his home state of Nebraska. Police have been unable to determine if Redmond was in Connecticut at the time of Connie's disappearance, and he actually passed a polygraph test when questioned about the case. A photograph circulated of a girl on the beach in the Bronx who had a resemblance to Connie, but this was later dismissed. In 1988, a woman came forward believing herself to be the missing girl. However, a DNA test confirmed she was not Connie Smith. A year after Connie vanished, Frederick Walker Pope, a 27-year-old travelling jewellery salesman, told police he and 2 travelling companions named Jack Walker and Wilma had picked up Connie on Route 44, promising to take her to Wyoming. He said, quote, "Connie was always talking about how tall her daddy was. She told me he was a real big man." This seemed significant at the time, since Peter Smith stood at 6 feet 7 inches tall, and this information fueled speculation that this witness did in fact converse with Connie Smith. Media reports stated that Frederick said they dropped Wilma off in Oklahoma and then carried on driving to Wyoming. Frederick Pope claimed that following an argument between Connie and his companion Jack and Connie exited the vehicle at a stop in Arizona, with only Jack returning. He allegedly told Frederick that he had fatally strangled Connie, and he insisted that Frederick should help him to bury her in a shallow grave. The pair then allegedly dug a grave off Route 60 between Show Low and Carrizo. As they continued their journey 50 miles further from their stop in Arizona, they stopped to change a tyre. According to Frederick, he then killed Jack with a tyre iron and, quote, dumped his body in a side road ravine where he concealed the body. Frederick then stated he abandoned the vehicle and subsequently hitchhiked to New Mexico. When Frederick Pope was being interrogated by Detective Russell N. Starks, his account began to crumble. The day prior to Connie's disappearance, Frederick had been registered for work at the Indiana Employment Security Division in Indianapolis, which in turn clashed with Frederick's alleged trip to Wyoming. It was impossible for him to have been in New England on the day Connie vanished. He then confessed that the entire story was fabricated, and he had seen Connie's disappearance being covered on the news. He claimed he lied because he wished to be taken to a healthcare facility to overcome alcoholism. On Halloween 1958, near Skinner Ridge in Arizona, just south of the Grand Canyon, bones were discovered and confirmed to be human remains. The bones were confirmed as female, and the teeth were compared with Connie's dental records, and although there were striking similarities, further tests were inconclusive, and the Arizona Jane Doe, known as Little Miss X, remains unidentified to this day. Helen Smith passed away from a heart attack in 1962 when she was just 47 years old, always believing that her daughter was still alive. For the rest of his life, Peter Smith never stopped in the hunt for his daughter. He said in 1984, whenever he saw a woman who would be the same age as Connie, he would imagine her face in theirs. He visited Lakeville in the 1980s, hoping to find new clues. After dedicating his time to the search for his daughter, Peter passed away with his son by his side on the 22nd of February 2012, aged 97. His obituary reportedly stated, quote, Pete Smith left for his next hunt at 4:35 p.m, February 22nd, 2012. The family of Connie Smith never gave up hope, believing that one day they would be reunited with their only daughter. Authorities believe there was foul play involved. However, with next to no evidence, the trail has gone cold over the decades. One of the most peculiar cases in Connecticut, the fate of Connie Smith remains a mystery, as does the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Despite having taken place over 70 years ago, the Connecticut State Police have kept the case open.